I asked, you answered, and it's democracy. The first subject is IT bands. And that didn't surprise me. IT band issues are prevalent. They are so prevalent that over the many years I've been working with walkers and runners and helping to the best of my ability. IT band issues and everything associated with that movement pattern forms level 2 in my book on how to find more efficient, more joyous running. So hopefully you'll all go on longer adventures. So in level 2, I said, why does tracking width matter? And I've just done a short to introduce this week's conversation, having fun and games on the treadmill, trying to stay upright whilst effectively my feet were crossing one over the other. I have never, in all of the years I've been doing this, decades, I have never seen or measured a walker or runner with IT band issues who hasn't had narrow tracking width. Now, what is tracking width? It's simply the space between your feet as you land. So it's kind of easily seen when you're walking because you'll make a little train track of footsteps when you're walking. You can see them in dewy grass, you can see them on sand. With running, it's slightly trickier because, of course, there's only one foot landing. But you can still get the flavor of whether or not there's any kind of lateral weight shift. We're not talking bounding from left to right. That's a great drill. But because we don't want to lose too much forward motion by lateral motion, but in order to access the full efficiency of our sling systems, which bound us from left to right when we're running and we only have one foot in contact with the ground, we definitely need some lateral movement, some movement from left to right and back again over and over again. The other thing, now that I measure everything on Doris, is tracking, very narrow tracking widths and more vertical oscillation. So instead of the energy going forward, up, of course, we're leaving the ground, forward, up, and a little bit to the left, forward, up, a little bit to the right, it's forward and up. And there's nothing right or wrong with this. I come from a position of finding efficiency in movement. And what I measure with less lateral movement and more narrow tracking with the up and down vertical oscillation is increased impact forces. So we're not so fragile that one little thing not quite right in our bodies is going to create any pain. It's almost like there's a tipping point. We need this and this and this and this, and then together with enough repetition and or intensity of movement, then things start to bother. And with IT band, it tends to be a repetitive strain issue. You rest, you do all the good stuff. You might have been advised to stretch. You might have been advised to strengthen glutes. You might have foam rollered. You might have had deep and very painful, actually, massage of the IT bands. And for some, that works. That's what they needed. For others, it provides relief, but it doesn't solve the problem because you go back into the repetitive strain injury cycle once you reach a certain distance, a certain amount of training, level of intensity, maybe hills, maybe intervals. So in that scenario, why? And, in an ideal world, one day we'd go straight to are our fundamental foundational movement patterns in order? Because it's a pattern that I see. Everything I see in patterns, and everything is a pattern. So in the why does tracking width matter, right at the very beginning, I say in my book, common injury patterns associated with tightrope runners, literally running along a tightrope, seem to be repetitive ankle sprains, the so-called dreaded runner's top of foot pain, repetitive calf issues, repetitive Achilles tendon issues, repetitive iliotibial band syndrome, endless knee issues, because of course that's where the IT band ends, groin strains, lower back issues, that's from the impact, the increased impact forces, I conjecture. Neck and shoulder pain when running, headaches during or after running. Now that's quite interesting, isn't it? The first part of the answering of the question is to find out, well, why are your IT bands grumbling? If you have foam rollered them, strengthen the area, stretch the area, why are they still grumbling? All somebody needs to do is film you. I have measured on Doris narrow tracking to the extent that literally one foot is in front of the other. Literally, they are walking and running along a tightrope, and they didn't know. Once, the person had an inkling. They'd read my book and they thought, I think I'm a tightrope runner. And they had widened, they had worked on widening their tracking width. And still, it was one of the narrowest Doris had ever measured. If we don't see us, how do we know how we're moving? So the easiest thing is either walk or run, just like I did for the short, towards a camera and have a look. Can you see daylight between your legs? Can you see daylight between your feet? Do your feet look as if they are landing under the hips? Now, I'm going to have to move the camera for this bit because I want to demo you something. I think it's always easier to understand things when we exaggerate. So literally, I've just put one foot in front of the other. And all I'm going to do is not change my body position, but just bend one knee so that you can see that this foot that's on the floor has the angle to the hip is coming out like one half of a V. So if I put my 2 feet in front of each other, I'm making a V from the ground to the hips. And so if I take my foot out of the way so you can see and just not change my body position apart from bend my the knee attached to the foot that's on the floor, I've got this much give. It's really hard for me to go any further than that. There's enormous strain. So I come up and I'm just going to put my feet underneath my hips in a nice, that's easy. And then I'll just take that foot out of the equation and I can see that my foot is underneath my hip and I've got all of this. So I go from this, and you don't believe me, you do it. So put your foot inside your hip and feel how much give you have in the system. Put your foot underneath your hip and feel how much give you have in the system. So, and this is what I measure consistently. What I do is think about things and measure them because I can. And I consistently see more impact forces. And it feels as if it's because, and we have to be very careful with the word because, it might be. It's probably, we can feel with the practical application of joint mechanics, we can feel that well, that shock absorption, that give in the system doesn't feel quite the same when my feet are close to the midline compared to when my feet are landing underneath my hips. So the corollary of that is, well, let's just land with our feet underneath our hips. How difficult can it be? Well, let me tell you, it's very, very difficult when you are running if the reason you are running along the tightrope in the first place is because your brain isn't quite sure where left and right is. And that's what I see all the time. So you don't have to do that to, know where left or right is. People tell me that they never get left and right wrong. They're cognitively sure on left and right, except their movement patterns tell me otherwise. The movement patterns give me the clue to think, okay, well, I need to help them immediately because they don't want to stop running. When somebody says, oh, you've got to stop running and rest, when you already know that stopping didn't solve the problem. You've done that half a dozen times already, and still the problem returns. In my experience, those people who run along a tightrope, and there are others that don't walk narrow tracking at all, but they run narrow tracking. So it's always on a spectrum. Everything, all our movement patterns are on a spectrum from disorganized at this end, disorganized at that end, and organized somewhere in the middle. So I have seen people organized, walking, feet landing underneath hips, all very nice. But as soon as they run, they go in towards the midline. It's as if the brain knows where midline is, but isn't really clear on everything else. So they suck in to where feels safe. And later, during a session, they will not like that place anymore because now it's been shown to them. They can see it, they can feel it. Their perception is that of different because they can now see that literally one foot is landing in front of the other, and that might be contributing to their IT band situation, or their endless knee issues, or their endless ankle sprains, or their endless groin issues, or their endless headaches. We'll come back to that. Their perception is that of, well, now they feel really wobbly. And by comparison, having a wider tracking helps them feel really nicely stable. So how do we get there? Well, there are cues in the book. You have to see it. One of my favorites is the sweet spot. Where the sweet spot, because this isn't a right or wrong way of running. This is access to all areas. So if you walk up and down while you're listening to me, putting one foot in front of the other, walking, you'll kind of get the sense that you're more on the outside of your foot. You have less awareness of the inside of the foot, unless you have landed on the outside and then very quickly overpronated and slapped down onto the inside, and you might already have been told, oh, you're an overpronator. Well, you might be overpronating, but why? You might be overpronating because the foot is landing inside the hip, and that's its strategy of, well, there's no more space. I'm just going to have to overpronate quick because I've got no space to do it nicely, to roll into my lovely pronation. So if your feet are too close together, you feel more the outside. And if they're too far apart and you're waddling, you're more on the inside of your foot. And I always think, be greedy, have it all. When you have more availability for movement within your system, movement tends to be more enjoyable because it's easier. So you're looking for the full breadth of the forefoot as you roll through it. Where does your foot need to be for you to access Yeti foot, big foot? Where you land when you're running, your first contact with the ground is another conversation. When you leave the ground is what I'm talking about, or as you roll through the foot. When the foot is in seemingly its ideal place for shock absorption, for accessing full breadth of forefoot, for easiest weight shift from that foot to the other foot in flight, offering all sorts of movement efficiencies according to our sling systems, fascia, you name it. That's another discussion. It's a big foot. It's the full spreading, relaxed forefoot. So that cue works often because you get a sense of what you're looking for. You've got to film it because otherwise it feels bonkers. And you'll see that it doesn't look bonkers. So when you next try it again, having filmed yourself, you'll try it again and you'll film again. And eventually you'll trust what you film and you'll trust what you feel. You can feel, no matter what cue you use, you can feel the full breadth of the forefoot. You can feel Yeti, Bigfoot. And that is the place, the landing place for the foot. Without placing the foot, it's just like this sense of, well, is it on the midline or is it underneath me? I don't want it outside me because then I've got less foot. Your insurance policy is you get maximum forefoot contact, no matter what your touchdown point is initially. I am approaching the subject based on my experience, which is that of 100% of the people I've worked with and measured are walking or running, sometimes both, with feet landing closer to the midline than under their hips, which sets up a pull on the outside. It'd be like if we, just for ease, here's my hip and my knee is inside my hip. So there's a pull on this lateral side of my shoulder there. And I'm pretending that's your hip. And you might also have been told that your glutes are sleepy and that glute bridges and clams is the answer because you need to strengthen them. My experience says, well, as soon as the knee comes underneath the hip, the glutes fire. Instant glute waking upness. And people report it to me. I think I could feel my glutes. And I say, well, of course you can, because the bones are in the right place for the soft tissue response that you want to happen for it to happen. If the bones aren't in the right place, how on earth do we get the glutes to fire? And you can't squeeze them as you run because literally that's a break. In level 9, we learn how to use glutes to haul ass, to stop on a sixpence when we're flying down hills. So glutes are fantastic for forward propulsion when the foot is landing more or less underneath the hip, and they're fantastic for stopping when you activate them. So if you discover that you also are walking or not walking but running with your feet landing closer to the midline than you thought, and there's really not much space at all, and you're not measuring it, you're just watching video. You're just saying, well, can I see space between my feet? Do my feet look as if they're underneath the hips? Is there an angle from my hips to my feet? My hips are here and my feet are my elbows now. Am I seeing that V? If you are, then the quick way in to help is some form of cue, which will feel mad, but it won't look mad. So you'll start to trust yourself. And if you are that person, then no matter how cognitively sound you are on left and right, spatial organization isn't as good as it could be. So then what do we do? Because we can't be thinking about cueing the whole, I hold my hands up. I've been at this for so long. I have cued until the cows came home. And it didn't solve the problem, which is why I'm here trying to help. It will get you so far. It will probably get you out of trouble. And it won't solve the problem because it doesn't make a habit. It doesn't, you're working in the cortex area of the brain, the outer area of the brain, the cognitive area of the brain, and we need to go into movement processing at the deepest innate foundational fundamental level. I always think, which part of the brain is in charge of this? Which part of the brain sorts this out? Because the brain is in charge of our wiggly body. We can't be thinking about all of this. So there must be a password for that part of the brain if we know the part of the brain that we want to speak to. What's the password for a bit of spatial disorganisation to some degree? Well, it seems to be information from the extremities in. Feet, hands, tongue. Tongue. It must also be tongue, because the tongue can be an extremity. It can be outside of your body and not be called a prolapse. And tongues, we should be sticking tongues out and moving them around, I think, a lot more than we do, and that's another story. So we'll stick to IT band. So if you found that you were the moving V from hips to feet, you cue your way out of it and support the cue so that you don't have to cue forever by organising within the brain left to right spatial awareness. Information into hands and feet. Now, I have done many clear, I hope, videos on Insta. It's as a short on YouTube, foot wiping. It only takes 2 minutes. It's free. I have got literally thousands of measurements of improvements just on foot wiping. Certainly foot wipe if you're hypersensitive, like, oh, don't touch my feet, oh, they're so tickly. Or hyposensitive, you can walk on coals, hot coals, you can walk on sharp stuff, doesn't bother you. Get some more information into your feet is my suggestion. Rubbing, not walking on sharp things, rubbing your feet and your hands. You can do it simultaneously. You can get something textured in your hands whilst you're rubbing your feet. Couple of minutes, twice a day. The brain uses the proprioceptive system. The proprioceptive system is little cells in the muscles, spindle cells, little cells in the tendons, Golgi tendon organs, and the exquisite sensitivity of the joint capsules to give it information about where it is. And the feet and the hands are so complex. You drive shed loads of information into the brain by working with these extremities. And then, of course, we have rope play, which sends even more proprioceptive information in through the 4 layers of muscle underneath the 26 bones and the 33 joints of your feet. So much information for the brain to use. Non-negotiable 1 for me in the pilot course, the pilot modules 1 to 6, feet is non-negotiable 1, module 1. And it's in troubleshooting checklist for walkers and runners. It's non-negotiable 1 in my world because by the time I meet you, you're already on your feet. So much as I would like to start with non-negotiable 2, I have to start with non-negotiable 1 because you're already on your feet. But you just have to wipe your feet and walk up and down a rope with the goal being, how much variability can I create within my feet on this 3D object? It's just a cheap, fun way in to create movement in each foot. And what I get reported is one person in the family came to see me and they get the rope 40 millimeters diameter. And then they can't get on the rope because everybody else in the family is on it, which for me just brings me joy because feet that are stuck in socks and shoes all day need more movement and information. Then we come to non-negotiable 2, the hand-to-mouth connections. And when these are hardwired to tight, what I see consistently is the pattern of narrow tracking when running and a shoulder girdle that only moves when running and doesn't move when walking. And it's such a consistent pattern, it's non-negotiable too. Whilst I have Doris and I can measure all of my thought processes, are we on track? Does this make sense? We all these days have access to technology. So you can just grab your phone. Oh, there's my little Elsa. She's still my wallpaper, my beloved Elsa. You can film yourself, not just looking now at where your feet land, but what's happening in the upper body. In my experience, again, it's so predictable. We move in patterns. Yes, we're all brilliantly different and unique, and we're kind of very similar, the same. If we go back to how we're made, innate, foundational, fundamental movement patterns, in our DNA, there's a timeline of all of these movement patterns that emerge. And I did a Lego story, which is trying to explain a sliver of this brain science in 17 minutes. I encourage you to look at it. Oh, and you can do that like and subscribe thing that I meant to say. It feels a bit weird. You'd think we know by now, but apparently I must. Thank you so much if you do. If you enjoy it. And this, if you've enjoyed this too, and if you found it helpful. So back to the patterns. The pattern is with IT band issues and the ankle sprains and the knee pain and the headaches. It is the tight hand-to-mouth connections which preclude free movement when walking of the upper body, but the feet might be landing in a nice place when walking because there is a left-right reference point for the brain. And when running, and I say to whoever I'm working with, I predict, and I've seen it so often, I think you're going to run better than you walk. So many run better than they walk. I wonder if that's you. I wonder if you run better than you walk. Because as soon as there's not the quadruped type movement when we're walking with contralateral limb movement, when we pick our arms up out of the equation, it's like our shoulder girdle, the arm, the collarbone, the shoulder blade, the rib cage, the spine, it's as if they all move as one unit. Because we've only got maybe 0.3 of a second in contact with the ground when running, and we've got 0.7 of a second maybe on the ground when walking. So less can happen when we're running. So it's neurologically less challenging when we run, but of course now we have the added intensity of having to absorb impact forces. So the upper body is released because we're not in the contralateral arm swing when we're running. But now there's no reference point to the on the ground because nothing is in contact, and the feet go into the middle. So you can film it and find out for yourself. And then set about solving the problems. Spatial organisation in the first instance. Keep it simple. It feels like Leonardo da Vinci's quote, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. We don't know everything yet. So let's start by keeping it as simple as possible and see what happens, especially if you've already tried stretching and strengthening and foam rolling. Let's flip it. If you haven't spoken to your extremities, then maybe give that a go. And my goal is to have everybody start there. Start with the innate, foundational, fundamental movement patterns. I think it might be more efficient in the long run. So I've already shown you out there in the world of social media how to foot wipe effectively, how to rope play effectively. You can buy courses, thank you if you're supporting my work, which gives you more information. And here I would like to share more because I want to weave it together. You apply pressure into the middle of your lemni. I have specially created this multitasking running tool to help a shoulder girdle move better when running, but also to solve the problem of innate hardwiring hardwiring that is too tight, that is precluding freedom of movement of the shoulder girdle. And you can, don't believe me, you can test for yourself. With relaxed fingers, all you do is apply pressure from the beautifully rounded ends of the lemni into the center a half a dozen times, maybe on an exhale. The brain scientists tell us that when we're speaking to the brain needs a 5-second hook. So I just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is essentially an exhale, a nice, easy exhale. So I just breathe in, breathe out pressure in. That was my 7. I relax to breathe in. I repeat that half a dozen times, and then I'll go 3 times into one hand and then 3 times into another. And if you open your mouth wide before you start, and then again wide after you've finished, you may find that your jaw is freer. When your jaw is freer, because of how we're made in our anatomy, it frees the shoulder girdle to some extent. Invariably, in my experience, enough of an extent to create far better movement potential. So we have established that you are going to see if you are a tightrope walker or runner, or both. And then regardless of whether or not you think that you're good on left and right, you're just going to assume that maybe in the brain, spatial organization left and right isn't quite there as well as it could be. So then you're going to give information to the extremities with foot wiping, rope play, the hand-to-mouth connection, which speaks to the jaw and the tongue, non-negotiable 1 and 2, and then you can go to the book. Then you can pick up from the better organized innate fundamental foundational movement patterns. Then you can go to the fancy joint mechanics. And there are drills in the book. This is my favorite chapter for the drills because you can play with I'm a little teapot and is there poo on my shoe, which is possibly the best fun drill of them all, or apart from Pentapussy. And it gives you so much information about left and right within your system. But first, the foundational, fundamental movement patterns, organize them, and then access to better via the joint mechanics, the grown-up joint mechanics, is much more likely to be absorbed by the system rather than a movement pattern relieving temporarily, but then reverting back to type as soon as you're half an hour away from a drill, because the innateness isn't organized deep, deep, deep within the brain. Okay. I hope that that has given you enough information to start to explore your own IT band issues and ankle sprain and knee pain and headachy after running or during running issues. Let me know how you get on. Let me know what the next question is. Do we need to do more on IT band? Do we need to do something else? I await your feedback.